Hi everyone, I want to try to make a video to try to explain my last video, but also had a really amazing revelation concerning the lily, and this was after I had done my last video. I didn't realize it at the time, but after I did that video, I came to realize something about the lily that I want to try to explain, and something about flowers in general. Okay, but before I get into that, I just want to explain a little bit about my last video and what it was exactly that I was trying to convey with the video. I was asked a question about that. I was asked why I don't just come out and just say what it is I'm trying to explain, and I just want to say I'm not purposely trying to be cryptic about it. I'm just trying to explain things the same way that God explains things, and just trying to let the scriptures and the images speak for themselves without really adding anything to it. I just usually just try to present a string of facts that all put together seem to make sense, and so that way I'm not adding my opinion or anything to the scriptures. I'm just letting the scriptures speak for themselves. And so I'm going to try to explain a little bit about what it was exactly that I was trying to convey in the video, but also want to say that obviously there was quite a few dislikes on the video, and I'm not really sure why so many people disliked the video based on the number of likes. That's a pretty high percentage, so that's a lot of dislikes in light of how many likes there are to the video. And so all I can say is that they either were able to figure out on their own what the mezuzah represents and they didn't like it, or they just didn't like the mezuzah, because I didn't say a single word in the video. I just shared this article that had a couple of videos explaining what a mezuzah is, and then I just showed some scriptures at the end. And so whatever it is they didn't like about it is just the fact of what the mezuzah is. So if they don't like the mezuzah and what it represents, then my guess is that they probably won't have any part in it since they don't like it. Okay, so I'm going to try to cut to the chase, and I just want to say that the bottom line of what I'm trying to portray and represent with this video and the other videos that I've been showing recently is that I believe that what God is showing throughout the scriptures is that it's the consummation of the covenant that will restore the DNA. I believe that's what's represented over here with the Sinai Peninsula, which is where Mount Sinai is located. It's also where Mount Horeb is located. Okay, Mount Horeb is the rock that when Moses struck the rock, the water came out of the rock. And this was recorded in Exodus 17, and so it's associated with the number 17. And like I said, Mount Horeb is located on the Sinai Peninsula, as well as Mount Sinai. This is where Moses received the Ten Commandments, and I've talked about how the Ten Commandments represent DNA, and so this is all ultimately about DNA, and so I want to talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so getting back to the mezuzah, as you can see from this article, it talks about that in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verses 4 through 9. Okay, and I'll just read that real quick. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and upon thy gates. And so this right here, this verse right here, is where the tradition of the mezuzah comes, and you can see that's located in Deuteronomy 6:9. I've talked about how the numbers 6:9 represent DNA, how it has those numbers in God's name as well as Eve's name, and how that's a representation of the DNA. And so this is in contrast to the mark of the beast. This is how God marks his children, with a mark on their hand and on their forehead. It says in the frontlets between thine eyes. Okay, and the word frontlet means bands or phylacteries. It's talking about binding, which again, I believe this is alluding to DNA. It says from an unused root, meaning to go around or to bind. Okay, so they're going to be bound between the frontlets of the eyes, as it says over here, which I believe is alluding to DNA, and then they'll be written on the posts of the gates of thy house. Okay, and if you look at the word house, you see that it also means temple, because our body is a temple, so that the actual temple is not really a building anymore. The Bible explains that our bodies are the temple of God, and of course the temple altogether, of all the believers altogether, is New Jerusalem, which is the temple of God. And so you see the word mezuzah over here. I just noticed that for the first time. So it's the word post, the doorposts are the mezuzah, and that's where the mezuzah is affixed. Okay, so I just want to quickly explain how I came across the tradition of the mezuzah, and what I was trying to do is I was trying to find an image of the Torah scroll when I was talking about this image over here in the I Pet Goat movie, where it shows the scroll in the hand, which is a depiction of Ezekiel 2:8 and 9 and Revelation 10:8 and 9. And so I wanted to find an image of the Torah scroll, but I wanted to find it rolled up into one roll rather than two rolls as you usually see it depicted. And so I wanted to find the entire Torah rolled up into one roll, similar to the Megillah, which is the word that's used in Ezekiel 2:9. You can see that here. It comes right after 2:8, where it says, "But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth and eat what I give thee. And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent to me, and lo, a roll of a book was therein." And so you see that that's the word Megillah in the Hebrew. And so this is what a Megillah looks like, just like the book of Esther is rolled up into one scroll, because it's a Megillah. And so I was trying to see if I could find the Torah, the entire Torah rolled up into one scroll. And so I had put in Torah symbol, and that's when I came across an image of a mezuzah. I'm not sure if it was this one over here, but I saw the entire Torah, or what looked like the entire Torah, rolled up into one scroll. And so that's when I looked into the mezuzah. And so it was actually a symbol of the entire Torah. It's not the entire Torah itself, but it symbolizes the Torah, the entire Torah. And you can see some of the images over here of a mezuzah, and they usually have the letter shin on it, as you can see with this one over here. It has the letter shin. And I've talked about before about the letter shin and how God wrote his name in the earth, in the place where he wanted to put his name, which is Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is identified by these three valleys, that create the letter Shin. And then you can see the city of David over here with the Temple Mount. And so this is the place where God put his name, which is Shaddai is one of the names of God, and it's represented by the letter Shin. Okay, and so I've talked about that before, and I've shown this image before, and it even mentions the mezuzah over here in this image. But at the time when I first showed this image, I had no idea what a mezuzah was, so this didn't really mean anything to me. Over here where it says a shin is a letter on every mezuzah. Okay, and so the mezuzah is affixed to the doorpost, and it's affixed as an angle, as it says here. And apparently even the rabbis aren't really sure why it's affixed at an angle, but as he explains in this video. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and play that part so you can hear his explanation.
I like the interpretation that it points upward from outside into our home, reminding us that when we cross this threshold, we are ascending a sacred space with the possibility of holiness within its walls and our lives.
Okay, so in case you didn't hear that, he said that he likes the interpretation that it's placed at an angle, as though it's entering through the doorpost into the house. Okay, I also thought it was interesting, and I didn't realize this at the time of the video. I didn't realize it until after I was trying to explain it, that it's interesting that they even use a Pez dispenser as a mezuzah, and it didn't dawn on me until after the video when I was trying to explain it, that a Pez dispenser has a little head, just like the word in the Greek, which is the same as the word Megillah, but the word in the Greek is Strong's number G2777, and you can see that that word means little head. It also means the roll of a book, which is the same as the word Megillah in the Hebrew. And it also means the toe cap of a shoe, as I've mentioned many times before. And so this is also Strong's number 2777, which also means little head. And you see that once the apple hits against this shoe, the apple splits in half, and then you see the two vines binding together, and then the flower blooms. And so I believe this, once again, is a representation of the consummation of the covenant, and I'll explain a little bit more why I believe that that's what this is representing a little later when I talk about flowers. But again, you see that it's the consummation of the covenant that restores the DNA. Okay, and it's really not that amazing that it would show that in the I Pet Goat movie, knowing what we know about DNA. But what's really amazing is that it's recorded in the Word of God that this is a representation of how the DNA is going to be restored. And DNA wasn't even discovered until about 1940. But you see that this comes up in Deuteronomy 6:4, which is 46 backwards. There's also 64 different combinations of codons that code for enzymes. There's 64 different combinations that can be made out of the 4 nucleotides. So that's another number representing DNA. And as I mentioned earlier, the 6 and the 9 is a representation of DNA. And so this is how God is going to restore our DNA. And this is in contrast to the mark of the beast, which is what's depicted over here with the state of Florida and the word love. And you see Obama with the teeth that look like fangs, just like the Google Doodle on Valentine's Day that had the 2 fangs. Okay, I'll go ahead and show you that again from Valentine's Day. And it was on Valentine's Day that you had the school shooting where 17 people were killed in the state of Florida. So again, you had the number 17 associated with what's going to take place. Okay, so this is how the Antichrist wants to change the DNA, as opposed to the way God is going to do it through the consummation of the covenant.